A second well-dressed man crouched down, shining his torch straight in Jake's face. "We're part of the world's largest family. You can be a part of that family, too. A problem shared." "Is a problem multiplied?" Jake wondered what had happened to the strange voice he'd heard earlier. "I've heard the tune before. It's the words I don't get." Fresh and much more intense, Haynes began. It was as if someone had switched on an electric circuit, linking every nerve ending in his body. He was a lit-up Christmas tree short of like Christmas. "You shouldn't look at it that way," the witnesses introduced as Oliver and Theodore. "Do you believe in the end of the world?" Jake said. He rolled onto his back and stared at the black sky. "The end is a lot closer than most people imagine." Theodore had a knowing look in his eye. "Most people have no idea." "No idea at all," Jake said flatly. "It could be today," Oliver added. "For you, it certainly will be." It was the voice again. "Christ! Did you hear that?" Jake squealed. "Hear what?" The witnesses looked around, confused. "That whiny little voice. It's threatening me." "We heard nothing. Perhaps it's an after-effect of your injuries." "Maybe you're right." Jake wondered if one of his ribs was broken. Jesus, maybe it was much worse. Brain damage? He hauled himself out of the puddle and struggled to his feet. The streets of Newcastle were wet and dark. Dime detective novel sleazy. A lot nicer than Jake's native Glasgow, right enough, but lacking the fond fellow feeling inspired by all that famous fraternal Glasgow kissing. "We must get you out of those wet clothes," Oliver said. "You're soaked through." Jake brushed off a condom that had been entangled with his belt and his jeans. "You're Jevies, aren't you?" "If you mean Jehovah's Witnesses, then we certainly are," Theodore answered. "Would you like to read some of our literature?" He fished in his satchel and thrust a copy of The Watchtower at Jake. Jake waved it away. He wasn't sure why he was even talking to God squatters. Normally he'd have told them to fuck right off, no matter what condition he was in. Maybe he was feeling vulnerable because of that nasty little voice. As soon as he thought that, the voice spoke again. "You might believe that you have a degree of control over what's happening, but you couldn't be more wrong." "What the fuck is happening?" Jake moaned. The two Jevies exchanged curious glances. They'd seen demonic possession before. "Who's talking to me?" Jake shouted. "I demand to know!" "Tonight's the night, Jakey boy," the voice replied. "The stranger within becomes the stranger without." "I don't frickin' believe this!" Jake cradled his wet head. "You're finished, Jake," the voice continued. "You had your chance, and now you blew it. Look at you, all washed up, and nobody going nowhere. For fuck's sake, fat millionaires have beaten you up, and now you're talking to Jevies. You couldn't sink any lower. So you see, it's time for a new outfit to run the show. Get the picture?" "Why don't you pick on someone else, you bastard?" Jake ranted. "You've been chosen, Jake, my boy. There's nothing you can do about it. Just tell yourself it was written in the stars as some astrological bollocks like that." "Why me?" "Why not, you shitty cunt?" "Get out of my head!" Jake screamed. "I'll be doing more than that. I'll be getting you out of your head." And with that, Jake knew he was in the biggest trouble of his life. All the lights came back on. Midnight. Christmas. Instantly a huge hologram appeared in the night sky, showing breathtakingly festive images. Grottos and elves and cribs, snowy castles and cozy families, and dining tables crammed with mouth-watering dishes. Parcels galore wrapped in the most expensive Christmas gift paper. Wine and snog and merriment, everyone laughing, a million bright smiles, a great shining, dazzling, brilliant, multicolored star in the sky. 3 men wearing gaudy Christmas paper crowns emerged from a speakeasy. They were guffawing, patting each other on the back, and wishing each other a Merry Christmas. "Merry Christmas to you, too!" they shouted at the Jevies, but Theodore and Alva squallowed. "We may be Christians," the Jevies said, "but we don't celebrate Christmas." "Eh?" one of the 3 drunks said. "We're professors of philosophy from the Ace University. How can you be Christians if you hate Christmas?" A little girl wandered by, clutching a handbag shaped like a sheep. Jake glanced at the debilitating building directly opposite. A closed-down wine bar called the Stables. The truth dawned. None of this was any accident. Here he was on Christmas Day, with a strange voice inside of him trying to get out, with 3 wise men from the East, or kings if you preferred, standing in front of him. There was a little shepherdess too. Throw in a couple of Doubting Thomases for good measure, and unjust persecution, well, a good beating up, by the rich folk. Lastly, and not least, a spectacular star in the sky. What did it all add up to? Jesus Christ, Jake thought. I'm turning into Jesus Christ! Cunt! The voice snarled. Correction, Jake reconsidered. I'm turning into the Antichrist. The hairs on his body stood on end. His hands shook. Colors and sounds ran into each other. Long-forgotten faces reappeared in his mind. Snippets of thousands of dimly remembered conversations strolled in and out of his consciousness, as though they were promenading through Lisa's Park. He had the feeling his mind was being emptied in preparation for being filled anew, with memories of something or someone else. Jake was getting desperate. Maybe the Jevies Jehovah was just the guy he needed to help him fight back against the voice. Whatever it was doing to him, the process was well underway and accelerating. He didn't have much time left. When the end comes, only Jehovah's Witnesses will be saved, Theodore said. Everyone else? Jake winced involuntarily as fresh pains convulsed through him. We need only concern ourselves with the saved. Saved from what? From ourselves. Jake understood perfectly. He sure as hell needed to be saved from the voice in his head. It wasn't pushing him out of the driving seat. Adrenaline surged through his body, and he started to sway. The word of Jehovah can be overpowering, Oliver whispered. We understand how you feel. It was the same my first time. Jake didn't answer. He had an army of worker ants toiling away inside of him, rearranging his molecular structure. The voice was gaining the upper hand, and he was powerless to prevent it. You're on your way out, bozo, the voice mocked. Say hello to the dinosaurs, 'cause you'll soon be every bit as extinct. Jake futilely tried to comprehend the incomprehensible. You don't understand, do you? The voice said. I am a voice that hasn't been heard for an eternity. If you like those trashy newspapers you enjoy reading, that I was a god and that I had a taste for late-night beach crawling on the golden sands of ancient Greece, you'd be either bang on the mark or off your fucking trolley. Not that I intend to confirm the rumors either way. What I am prepared to do, say in this. I'm all strange things. I'm strangeness itself. Think of me as a kind of sickness. A sickness, I might add, and indeed I shall, since I'm that sort of guy. That once it has touched you, can only be purged by an eruption. You may ejaculate, but not over the carpet for fuck's sake. Or vomit, ditto. Maybe you'll scream until the top detaches itself from your head, and so much the better. The voice's takeover was nearing completion. Jake ought to have been appalled, yet somehow he scarcely minded now. Maybe it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. At least someone in charge who actually knew what they were doing. "Show time," the voice declared. It had won. It prepared to declare its first audible words to the quaking world. Oh, how the fools would suffer. "My God, what's happened to you?" Theodore said to the former Jake. The former Jake smiled, knowing his transformation must have rendered him a sight terrible to behold, striking fear into every heart. He attempted to speak aloud to the world for the very first time, but strange, wrong words were in his mouth. What the hell was going on? He caught a sight of his reflection in the window and vomited, making a nice Jackson Pollock mess on the snow. He wasn't a young, slim, godlike creature, in the most stylish of clothes that he was expecting. Instead, he was tubby, old, with a thick white beard, and a large sack over his shoulder, containing what felt like hard-edged, boxy parcels. And why on earth was he wearing red, his least favorite color? "Ho, ho, ho!" he blurted involuntarily. Then the realization, the horrific, cold, unadulterated truth struck home. He knew exactly what he'd become, and the terrible, appalling first words that were to spew from his mouth, mocking everything he stood for. "Merry Christmas, everybody!" he bellowed in a ridiculously jolly voice.